She was auctioned. He claimed her. They said she was worthless. But he saw something no one else did. She answered impossible questions, survived poisoning, exposed a conspiracy, and she learned the truth. She was never broken. But the woman who tried to kill her, she wasn't acting alone. The king has ridden to war. Lucy is trapped in the fortress, and the real betrayal is about to be revealed. If you missed part 1, go back now, because part 2 doesn't hold your hand. Let's go. The western border was 3 days' ride. The king left within the hour, taking his best soldiers and the woman with the blade. Captain Sierra, Lucy learned her name was. He left strict orders. Lucy was to remain in the fortress, guarded at all times, and trust no one. "I'll return," he'd said before leaving, his hand briefly touching her shoulder. "And when I do, you'll answer the riddle." Then he was gone, and Lucy was left in a fortress that suddenly felt enormous and empty. The first day passed in tense silence. Lucy remained in her chambers, reading but not absorbing, eating but not tasting. Mira brought her meals personally, standing watch while she ate. "You should know," Mira said on the second evening. "The court is divided. Half think you're a spy who exposed Arena to gain the king's trust. The other half think you're a pawn he's using to consolidate power." "What do you think?" Lucy asked. Mira's expression was carefully neutral. "I think you're the first person in a decade who's made him feel something other than duty, and that terrifies them." "Why?" "Because a king who feels is a king who can be manipulated." Mira set down the tray. "But also because a king who feels is a king who might choose a person over a crown, and that makes the crown less stable." "I would never ask him to choose," Lucy said quietly. "You won't have to." Mira moved toward the door. "He's already choosing." On the third day, a rider arrived. Lucy heard the commotion from her window. Guards rushing to the gates, servants whispering in corridors. She found Mira in the hallway. "What's happened?" "The king is returning, but there's been complications." "What kind of complications?" Mira hesitated. "Lady Arena is dead, killed in the confrontation, but before she died, she named accomplices, people in this court." Her gaze was heavy. "People close to the king." Lucy's blood ran cold. "Who?" "He'll announce it when he arrives, but you should prepare yourself." Mira's voice dropped. "One of them was his chief advisor, the man who questioned your presence in the council. Marcus, the gray-haired man who'd asked how they knew she wasn't a spy. He'd asked because he was one." The king returned at dusk, his armor stained with blood and dirt, his expression carved from stone. He went directly to the throne room and summoned the entire court. Lucy stood at the back, her heart pounding. The king did not sit. He stood before the throne, Captain Sierra at his side, and addressed the gathered nobles. "Lady Arena is dead," he announced, his voice carrying through the chamber. "She led the raiding parties that struck our northern villages. She coordinated the smuggling operations at the southern ports, and she did not act alone." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marcus of House Greythorn stepped forward. The gray-haired advisor went pale. He did not move. "Now," the king commanded. Guards surrounded Marcus, forcing him to the center of the room. He stumbled, his hands shaking. "You knew about the raids," the king said coldly. "You diverted patrols. You suppressed reports. You ensured we looked north while the south bled." His gaze was merciless. "And when someone finally noticed the pattern, you tried to discredit her." Marcus's eyes darted to Lucy. She's an outsider. No one knows where she came from. I was protecting—" "You were protecting yourself," the king said, "and it failed." He turned to Captain Sierra. "Take him to the cells. He'll stand trial at dawn." As Marcus was dragged away, the king's gaze swept the court. "Anyone else involved will be found, and when they are, they will answer for every life lost, every village burned, every family destroyed by your greed." Silence. "Dismissed." The court emptied quickly, nobles fleeing before they could be scrutinized too closely. Soon, only Lucy and the king remained. He looked at her across the empty chamber, exhausted and blood-stained, and something in his expression cracked. "You were right," he said quietly. About all of it. I didn't want to be, Lucy replied. I know. He descended the dais slowly. Irina confessed before she died. She'd been working with smugglers for years. When I bought you, she saw the way I... He paused. She saw that you mattered, and she couldn't risk you noticing what she was doing. So, she tried to eliminate you. She almost succeeded. I know, his jaw tightened. I should have seen it sooner, should have protected you better. You saved my life, Lucy said. You found the journal. You noticed I was sick. I put you in danger by bringing you here, the king interrupted, his voice rough. Everything that's happened, the poisoning, the threats, the court turning on you, it's because I chose you, because I made you visible. You also made me real, Lucy said softly. For the first time in my life, I'm not disappearing. I'm not being erased. I exist. And yes, that's dangerous. But it's also... She searched for the word. It's also mine. The king stared at her, something raw and unguarded in his expression. The riddle, he said hoarsely. Before I left... I remember. Do you have an answer? Lucy's heart raced. She thought of everything that had happened. The auction, the questions, the poisoning, the court, the truth about her uncle, the king who had seen her when no one else had. Would you stay if I stopped asking? Yes, she whispered. The king went very still. Yes? Yes, I would stay. Lucy stepped closer, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Not because you ask, not because I'm trapped, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because... She paused, the truth rising like a tide. Because I want to see what comes next, with you. The king's breath hitched, and for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled, really smiled. Then stay, he said softly. But before she could respond, Captain Syrah appeared in the doorway, her expression grim. Your Majesty, we have a problem. The problem was a letter, found in Irina's belongings, written in code, but decoded by the king's scholars within hours. Captain Syrah laid it on the table in the king's study, Lucy standing beside him. It's addressed to someone in the capital, Syrah said. Someone with access to royal records, someone who's been feeding information to the smugglers for years. Who? The king demanded. Syrah's expression was pained. We don't know yet. The name is encoded, but there's something else. She pointed to a line near the bottom. It mentions Lucy. Specifically. Lucy's blood froze. The king leaned forward, reading. His expression darkened. The Baron Omega is more dangerous than anticipated. The king's attachment grows. If she cannot be eliminated, she must be used. Retrieve the uncle. He will provide leverage. Silence. Gregor, Lucy whispered. They're going after my uncle. Why? The king asked. Because if they have him, they have leverage over me. Lucy's mind raced. If they threaten him, they think You'll what? Betray me? The king's voice was sharp. No, Lucy said firmly, but they don't know that. They think I'm still the girl who could be controlled by family obligation. They don't know I've already let him go. The king studied her. Have you? Lucy met his gaze. Yes. He nodded once. Then we end this? Tonight? How? By setting a trap. The king turned to Syrah. Send word that Lucy has agreed to meet with her uncle, privately, in the East Gardens, tomorrow at dawn. And when they come, Syrah asked, we'll be waiting. The East Gardens were cold before dawn. Frost clung to the stone paths, and mist rose from the ornamental pools like breath. Lucy stood in the center of the garden, alone, wearing the gray cloak Mira had given her. Her hands were steady, but her heart raced. She was bait. Somewhere in the shadows, the king waited with Captain Syrah and a dozen soldiers. They had positioned themselves carefully, behind hedges, in doorways, along the garden walls. Invisible, but present. Lucy had only one instruction. Keep whoever came talking until they revealed themselves. The sun was just beginning to lighten the eastern sky when she heard footsteps. Two figures emerged from the mist. Her uncle Gregor, his hands bound, stumbling as someone pushed him forward, and behind him, Lucy's breath caught. Mira, the king's seneschal. The woman who had served him for years. The woman who had warned Lucy, protected her, brought her meals. "Mira," Lucy whispered. Mira's expression was calm, almost apologetic. In her hand, she held a small blade pressed to Gregor's throat. "I'm sorry it came to this," Mira said quietly. "I truly am. You were never supposed to matter." Lucy forced herself to speak. "You're the one. The contact in the capital." "For 12 years," Mira confirmed. "Long before the king took the throne. I've watched 3 rulers come and go, each one believing I was loyal, each one wrong. Why? Because loyalty doesn't pay debts. Loyalty doesn't feed starving children or save dying villages." Mira's voice was steady, almost reasonable. "The crown takes and takes and takes. Someone had to take back." "By burning villages?" Lucy asked, her voice sharp. "By poisoning me?" "You were collateral damage," Mira said. "The poisoning was Arena's idea. I argued against it. But when you started noticing patterns, started asking questions..." She shook her head. "You became too dangerous to ignore. So you sent Arena to kill me. I sent her to handle you. She chose poison." Mira's grip tightened on the blade. "And when that failed, we decided to use what we had left. Your uncle." Gregor whimpered, his eyes finding Lucy's. "Please, I didn't... They came for me. I didn't have a choice." "You never do," Lucy said coldly. Mira smiled faintly. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell the king to let me leave. You're going to convince him that I'm not worth pursuing, and in exchange, I'll let your uncle live. And if I don't, then I kill him. Right here. Right now." Mira's blade pressed harder against Gregor's throat, drawing a thin line of blood. "And you'll have to live with knowing you chose a king over family." Lucy's mind raced. The king was watching, listening, waiting for her signal. But if she signaled too soon, Mira would kill Gregor before the guards could intervene. She needed more time. "Why my uncle?" Lucy asked. "Why not just take me hostage?" "Because you're too valuable to him," Mira said. "If we took you, he'd raise the kingdom to get you back. But your uncle?" She shrugged. "You hate him. Everyone knows it. The question is whether you hate him enough to watch him die." Silence. Lucy looked at Gregor, the man who had poisoned her, sold her, destroyed her life to save his own. The man who had never protected her, never seen her. She should want him dead. But she didn't. Not because she forgave him, but because she refused to let Mira decide what she became. "Let him go," Lucy said quietly. "Then tell the king." "No." Mira's eyes narrowed. "What?" "I said no." Lucy stepped forward. "You think you understand the king. You think you've watched him long enough to predict him. But you don't know what he values. You don't know what makes him dangerous." "Enlighten me," Mira said coldly. "He doesn't care about my uncle," Lucy said. "And neither do I. My uncle is nothing to me. But what you've done, betraying him for 12 years, burning villages, killing innocents, poisoning me..." She paused. "That he will never forgive. You could hold my uncle, hold me, hold the entire kingdom hostage, and he would still come for you. Because you took something from him that he can't get back." "What's that?" "Trust." Mira's expression flickered, just for a moment, and in that moment, the king stepped out of the shadows. "Drop the blade," he said, his voice cold and final. Mira's hand trembled. She pressed the knife harder against Gregor's throat. "Stay back, or I..." An arrow pierced her shoulder. She cried out, the blade falling from her hand as she staggered backward. Captain Sirah emerged from behind a hedge, bow still raised. Guards swarmed forward, surrounding Mira before she could recover. Gregor collapsed, gasping, his hands clutching his throat where the blade had been. The king crossed the garden in long strides, his gaze locked on Lucy. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "No." He studied her face, searching for something. Then he turned to Mira, now restrained by guards. 12 years, he said quietly. 12 years you stood beside me, advised me, protected me, and all of it was a lie. Mira lifted her chin, defiant despite the blood seeping through her shoulder. Not all of it. Some of my counsel was genuine. I just made sure you never looked too closely at the things that mattered." "Until she did," the king said, glancing at Lucy. "Until she did," Mira agreed. "You should have left her in that auction house, Your Majesty. You should have let her disappear, because the moment you made her visible, you made everything else visible too." The king's expression was unreadable. "Take her to the cells. She stands trial with Marcus." As the guards dragged Mira away, she called back, "You think you've won? There are others. There are always others. You can't protect her from everyone." The king said nothing, and Lucy knew Mira was right. When the garden emptied, only she and the king remained. Gregor had been taken to the healers, still gasping, still alive. "You could have signaled sooner," the king said quietly, "before she drew blood." "I needed her to believe she was in control," Lucy replied. "If she'd panicked, she would have killed him." "Would that have mattered?" Lucy looked at him. "He's still my uncle. I don't forgive him. I may never forgive him. But I won't let someone else make me into a person who watches people die without trying to stop it." The king's expression softened. "That's why you matter. Because I'm soft? Because you're strong enough to be kind when you have every reason not to be." He stepped closer. "Mira was right about one thing. I can't protect you from everyone. This court, this kingdom, there will always be someone who sees you as a threat." "I know. And yet you stayed." "I answered the riddle," Lucy said. "I told you I would stay." "I heard." The king's gaze was intense, searching. "But I need to know. Did you mean it?" Lucy's heart pounded. "Yes. Even knowing it will never be safe, even knowing there will always be someone trying to tear you down. Even knowing all of that." The king took a breath. "Then I need to ask you something else. Something I should have asked weeks ago." He reached for her hand, the first time he'd touched her beyond brief formal contact. His palm was warm, calloused, steady. "I don't know how to do this gently," he said. "I've spent my entire life learning how to be a king, how to command, how to inspire fear and loyalty. But I never learned how to—" He paused, searching for words. "I never learned how to ask someone to choose me. Not the crown, not the power, just me." Lucy's breath caught. "So, I'm asking," the king continued, his voice rough. "Not because you owe me, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because I want you to want to be here, with me." He paused. "Do you?" Lucy looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who had seen her when she was invisible, who had given her back her truth, who had defended her, protected her, asked her questions no one else bothered to ask. The man who had never tried to save her, only to see her. "Yes," she whispered. "I do." The king's eyes closed briefly, relief washing over his features. "Then stay," he said. "Not as something I bought, not as someone I'm protecting." "Stay as myself," Lucy finished. "As yourself," he agreed. And for the first time, she felt it. Not safety, but something more important. Belonging. The trials were swift. Marcus and Mira were both found guilty of treason, conspiracy, and murder. The evidence was overwhelming. Letters, confessions from accomplices, financial records showing years of stolen goods. The court watched in silence as sentence was passed. Exile to the frozen wastelands beyond the northern border, where they would live out their days in the cold they had brought to others. It was not death, but it was the slow erasure they had tried to inflict on Lucy. The king stood before the court and spoke words that echoed through the chamber. "Those who profit from making others invisible will themselves be forgotten." And Lucy, watching from her place beside the throne, felt the weight of justice without vengeance. In the weeks that followed, the fortress changed. New advisors were appointed, carefully vetted, closely watched. The court, shaken by the betrayals, became quieter, more cautious. And Lucy found herself no longer questioned when she entered rooms, no longer dismissed when she spoke. She had not gained power, she had simply stopped being invisible. The king's healer confirmed what the journal had revealed. The suppressant could be reversed. It would take time, perhaps months, but her body had never been broken, only paused. "You were always whole," the healer said. "They just convinced you otherwise." Lucy wept when she heard it, not for what she'd lost, but for what she'd survived believing. 1 month after the trials, the king found her in the library. She was reading by candlelight, the same alcove where she'd spent so many hours. But now there were better chairs, warmer blankets, fresh candles that didn't sputter and die, small kindnesses that told her she mattered. "I have something for you," the king said. He placed a sealed letter on the table. Lucy looked at it, then at him. "What is it?" "A pardon for your uncle." He sat across from her. "His debts have been paid. He's free to return to his lands if he wishes. Or he can stay in exile. That choice is his." Lucy stared at the letter. "Why?" "Because you asked me not to kill him, and because I realized, holding on to him, punishing him, it doesn't change what he did, it just keeps you tied to it." The king's gaze was steady. "This way, you're free, completely." Lucy's throat tightened. "What if he comes back? What if he tries to—" "He won't," the king said firmly. "I made it clear that if he ever speaks your name, if he ever approaches you, if he ever tries to profit from your connection to this court, the pardon is void. He knows. And he's too much of a coward to risk it." Lucy picked up the letter, feeling its weight. Then she set it down. "I don't need to read it," she said quietly. "I trust you." The king's expression shifted. Surprise, then something deeper. "You've never said that before." "I've never meant it before." Lucy met his gaze. "But I do now. I trust you." Silence stretched between them, warm and intimate. Then the king stood and offered his hand. "Come with me." He led her to the highest tower of the fortress. They climbed the winding stairs until they emerged onto a stone balcony overlooking the entire kingdom. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Mountains stretched to the horizon, dark and eternal. "I come here when I need to remember," the king said quietly. "Remember what? That I'm not the crown. I'm not the throne. I'm not what people need me to be." He turned to her. "I'm just this. A man standing on a tower, trying to figure out what matters." Lucy stepped beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "And what have you decided?" she asked. "That the only thing that matters is what you choose when no one's watching. When there's no audience, no judgment, just you and the truth." He paused. "You taught me that." "I didn't teach you anything." "You taught me everything." The king turned to face her fully. "You showed me that strength isn't power. It's enduring without becoming cruel. It's being seen and choosing not to hide. It's answering impossible questions even when silence would be safer." Lucy's heart raced. "I have one more question," the king said softly. "The last one. The riddle?" "No. Something different." He took both her hands in his. "I'm asking not as a king, not as someone who bought you or protected you or uncovered your truth. I'm asking as someone who has watched you become more yourself every single day, and who wants to keep watching. Forever." His voice dropped, vulnerable and raw. "Will you stay? Not because I keep asking, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to build something with me, something real, something that's ours." Lucy's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll stay." "Why?" he asked, needing to hear it. "Because you never tried to save me," she said, her voice breaking. "You just refused to let me disappear. You saw me when I was nothing, and you kept seeing me even when it was dangerous, even when it cost you." She paused. "You didn't make me into something I wasn't. You just made space for me to remember what I was." The king's eyes glistened. "I love you," he said. "Not because you're clever or brave, or because you solved impossible problems. I love you because when the world told you that you didn't matter, you survived anyway. And when I asked you to stay, you chose me." "I choose you," Lucy said firmly. "Every day, every moment. I choose you." He pulled her close, and for the first time, she let herself be held. Not as someone fragile, not as someone saved, but as someone chosen. Far below, in the great hall, servants prepared for an announcement. The court gathered, whispering about what the king might declare. And when he and Lucy descended together, her hand in his expression unguarded, they saw it immediately. She was no longer the barren Omega bought at auction. She was the woman the king had chosen, not for what she could give him, but for who she was. And in the eyes of the court, some respectful, some resentful, all of them watching, she saw her own reflection transformed, not by power, not by blood, but by the simple revolutionary act of being seen. 6 months later, Lucy stood in the same library where she had first found refuge. But now, she stood as the king's consort, as his closest advisor, as the woman who had helped reshape a kingdom by asking the questions no one else dared to ask. The healers had confirmed it. The suppressant was gone. Her body was healing. And whether she ever bore children or not, she knew her worth had never depended on it. She was reading when the king entered, carrying a small wooden box. "I found something," he said, setting it on the table. Inside was a collection of letters, all addressed to her, from villages she'd helped save, from families who'd heard her story and found courage in it, from women who'd been discarded and learned they could survive. "You've become a symbol," the king said softly, "to people who thought they didn't matter." Lucy touched the letters, overwhelmed. "I didn't do anything," she whispered. "You existed," the king said, loudly, visibly, without apologizing, and that was everything. He pulled out one more letter, old, sealed with wax. "This one is from me," he said, "written the day I bought you. I want you to read it now." Lucy opened it with trembling hands. "I don't know your name yet. I don't know your story. But I saw something in your eyes that I haven't seen in years. Refusal. You refuse to perform. Refuse to beg. Refuse to make yourself smaller. And I thought, if someone that powerless can refuse to disappear, what could they become if someone simply stopped trying to erase them? I'm buying you not because I need you, but because I want to know what you'll choose when the choice is finally yours." Lucy's tears fell onto the paper. "What do you choose?" the king asked softly. She looked at him, at the man who had given her back her truth, her voice, herself. "I choose this," she said. "I choose you. I choose us, every single day." And when he kissed her, it was not a rescue, it was a recognition. Two people who had found each other in the dark and refused to let go. The council chamber had changed. Where once only men had sat, now women filled half the seats. Where once decisions about pack law and marriage contracts had been made without question, now every proposal faced scrutiny from voices that had been silent for generations. Lucy stood at the head of the table, a scroll unfurled before her, and addressed the council with the same steady voice that had once told stories in a library. "The fertility clause," she said, "has been used for 3 generations to dissolve marriages, strip women of property, and justify abandonment. I propose we abolish it entirely." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Lord Haven, one of the old guard who'd remained after the purge, leaned forward. "With respect, my lady, the clause exists to protect bloodlines. Without it, how do we ensure—" "Ensure what?" Lucy interrupted, her tone sharp but controlled. "That women remain property to be measured and discarded? That their worth is tied to their wombs and nothing else? That's not what I—" "That's exactly what you meant." She straightened. "The fertility clause doesn't protect bloodlines. It protects men who want an escape from commitment, and this kingdom no longer tolerates it." The king, seated at her right hand, said nothing. He simply watched her with the same quiet intensity he'd had since the day he bought her. "The proposal passes," he said when the room fell silent. "Draft the amendment. It goes into effect immediately." Lord Haven's jaw tightened, but he nodded. As the council dispersed, Lucy gathered her papers, her hands steady despite the exhaustion pulling at her. She had spent 2 years reshaping laws that had stood for centuries. 2 years fighting battles in council chambers instead of battlefields. And she was tired. "You didn't have to support me so quickly," she said quietly when only she and the king remained. "Yes, I did." He moved closer. "Because you were right, and because every moment I hesitate is a moment someone else suffers what you suffered." Lucy looked at him, at the man who had never stopped seeing her, even when seeing her meant challenging everything his kingdom believed. "I'm pregnant," she said. The words fell into the space between them, simple and devastating. The king went very still. "How long have you known?" he asked carefully. 3 weeks. The healer confirmed it this morning." Lucy set down the papers, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. And before you ask, yes, I'm afraid. Of what? That everything will change, that the council will stop listening to me because they'll see me as just another woman doing what women are supposed to do, that I'll become... She trailed off. Invisible again, the king finished softly. Yes. He reached for her hand. Look at me. She did. You just abolished a 3-generation-old law, he said. You've reshaped inheritance rights, established women's councils in every territory, and created sanctuaries for those discarded by their packs. You did all of that while the entire kingdom knew you were infertile, or believed you were. He paused. Do you really think a pregnancy will erase any of that? I think it will give them permission to dismiss it, Lucy said quietly. To say I was only angry because I couldn't have children, that now that I can, I'll stop caring about the women who can't. The king's expression darkened. Then we make it clear that's not what this means. How? By doing what we've always done. His grip on her hand tightened. By refusing to let them rewrite your story. By showing them that you're not fighting for yourself. You're fighting for a kingdom where no one has to be you, where no woman is measured by her womb, where worth is inherent, not earned. Lucy's eyes filled with tears. What if I can't do both? Be a mother and be... this? Then you choose, the king said simply. And I'll support whatever you choose. If you want to step back from the council, I'll respect it. If you want to keep fighting while you're pregnant, I'll stand beside you. If you want to do something entirely different, we'll figure it out together. He cupped her face gently. But don't step back because you're afraid of what they'll think. Step back only if you want to. I don't want to, she whispered. I'm not done yet. Then you're not done. The announcement was made a week later. Lucy stood before the court, her hand resting on her still flat abdomen, and spoke words that would be recorded in history. I carry a child, and I carry a responsibility to every woman in this kingdom who has been told that one defines the other. It does not. I will be a mother. I will also continue to serve this kingdom as I have, by asking questions others won't ask, by challenging laws others won't challenge, by refusing to disappear. She paused, her gaze sweeping the chamber. And if any of you believe that motherhood will soften me, will make me more amenable to the old ways, will convince me that the fertility clause should be restored, her voice hardened, you've learned nothing about who I am. The court was silent. Then from the back, a woman stood. One of the newly appointed council members, a former Omega who had been abandoned by her mate, who had survived through Lucy's reforms. We stand with you, she said clearly. Another woman stood, then another, then another. Soon half the chamber was on their feet, and Lucy realized she had not just survived being seen. She had created space for others to be seen too. That night, the king found her on the tower balcony, the same place where she'd first told him she would stay. Do you regret it? He asked, choosing this life? Lucy looked out over the kingdom, at the mountains dark against the stars, at the villages below where women slept, knowing they could not be cast aside for failing to conceive. No, she said, I regret nothing. Not even the hard parts? Especially not the hard parts. She turned to him. They made me who I am. The king pulled her close, his hand resting over hers on her abdomen. What do you think they'll be like? Our child? Loved, Lucy said immediately. Whether they're strong or weak, wolf or human, fertile or not, they'll be loved, because their worth isn't conditional. Like yours never was, the king murmured. Like mine never was, she agreed. They stood together in the darkness, two people who had found each other in an auction house and built something the world said was impossible. A partnership based not on power or utility or bloodlines, but on the simple, revolutionary act of seeing each other completely and choosing to stay. 6 months later, Lucy gave birth to a daughter. She was small, fierce, and born without a wolf. The court waited to see what the king would do, whether he would be disappointed, whether he would seek another mate, whether this would prove that even reformed kingdoms still valued power over all else. Instead, the king held his daughter in the throne room and made a proclamation. This child will inherit my crown, not because of what she can do or who she might become, but because she is mine, and in this kingdom, that is enough." He looked at Lucy, standing beside him, exhausted and radiant, just as her mother taught me. And when the court bowed, not in fear, but in recognition, Lucy understood. She had not just changed laws, she had changed what it meant to matter.